There are several blessings that are recited at a Berit Milah ceremony, and we find a difference of opinion among the authorities regarding whether the father of the baby recites the blessing of the Hachniso B'Brito Shel Abraham Avinu before or after the Berit Milah. In the Beit Yosef, Maran discussed the opinion of Rashbam, who wrote that this blessing is recited before the Berit Milah because he considered it a Birchat Mizvah, which should be recited before the performance of the Mizvah, which in this case is the Berit Milah. Maran also discussed the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, who based on their custom taught that this blessing should be recited after the Berit Milah. Rabbeinu Tam explained, one only recites the blessing for a Mizvah before the Mizvah when they themselves are performing the Mizvah. But in this case, since the Mohel is the one performing the Mizvah, the father should wait until after the Mizvah was performed before reciting his blessing. Yet others explain that the father's blessing is not a Birchat Mizvah, but rather a Birchat HaShebach, a blessing of praise, which does not have to be recited before the performance of the Mizvah. In Shulchan Aruch, Maran ruled in accordance with the opinion of the Rosh, who recited this blessing in between the Milah and the Piri'ah. The Piri'ah is the peeling back of a thin tissue that is found underneath the foreskin. Since Piri'ah is required in order to complete the circumcision, reciting this blessing before the Piri'ah is considered reciting the blessing before the Mizvah is completed, which is a compromise between reciting the blessing before or after the Berit Milah. The general rule in Halab and other Middle Eastern communities was to follow Maran, but this is an exceptional case. In the end of the 18th century, Hakam Eliyahu Shammah HaLevi published a book on the laws of Berit Milah, which he called Machshirei Milah. In this book he wrote that the custom in Aleppo and Damascus and Iraq and other places was to recite the blessing of the Hachniso before the Berit Milah. He then addressed the question of not following Shulchan Aruch like we usually do, and he wrote that the custom is based on the opinions of the Rif and Harambam, who lived several centuries before Maran wrote Shulchan Aruch. So even after Maran wrote that it should be recited in between the Milah and the Piri'ah, the custom in Syria and Iraq did not change. They continued with their earlier custom of reciting it before the Berit Milah. Hakam Eliyahu Shammah also quoted the book Shulchan Gaboah, who wrote that even though the custom in Salonika was to recite the blessing in between the Milah and the Piri'ah, the custom in Jerusalem was to recite the blessing before the Berit Milah. Interestingly, Rabbi Haim ben Ashes Tehon cited Machshirei Milah in his book Eretz Hayim. But he also noted that the custom in Safed, his city in northern Israel, was in accordance with the ruling of Maran and Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Rafael Aharon ben Shimon also quoted Machshirei Milah in his book Nehar Mitzrayim on the customs of Egypt. And he affirmed that the custom of Egypt was like the custom in Syria and other places that recite the blessing of the Hachniso before the Berit Milah. He also added that this is the custom in North African communities and many other places. The book Keter Shem Tov also quoted Machshirei Milah, and then he wrote that the custom in the land of Israel, Iraq, Syria, and Egypt was to recite the blessing of the Hachniso before the Berit Milah. So we see that even though Maran wrote that the blessing of the Hachniso should be recited in between the Berit Milah and the Piri'ah, the custom in Syria, Egypt, Jerusalem, and Iraq was to recite this blessing before the Berit Milah. And this was the custom in North African communities as well. Although the general rule is to follow Shulchan Aruch, there are exceptional cases. This is a case of a custom that predated Shulchan Aruch and remained in effect even after the general acceptance of Shulchan Aruch. Now the last blessing recited at a Berit Milah is the blessing of Asher Kadesh Yedid Mi Beten. Included in this blessing is the phrase of Al Ken V'Schar Zot, referring to the reward for performing the Mizvah of Berit Milah. Many Sidurim have changed the word from Zot to Zo. However, Hakam Eliyahu Shammah recorded the exact wording of this blessing in his book Machshirei Milah, and he has Zot, as we find in our printings of the Gemara, Harambam, and the Tur. Interestingly, the use of the word Zot is a reference to a pasuk that is found at the end of Perashat Lech Lecha, which described the Berit Milah with Zot Beriti. So we see from Hakam Eliyahu Shama that it was customary to say Bischar Zot in Halab, at least since the end of the 18th century, as opposed to Zo, which is found in many Sidurim.